The living room smelled like his cologne, the one he never wore for real work trips. I folded his shirts, trying not to notice the nervous rhythm of his hands as he zipped the suitcase. The TV hummed softly in the background, but it couldn't cover the silence stretching between us. I smiled, pretending to be the calm, supportive wife, while inside, a knot twisted tighter with every passing second. I'd worn this mask before, that polite smile women use when they already sense the lie. He leaned against the doorway with that practiced grin, casual and warm on the surface. "Just 2 nights," he said, like it was nothing. I played along. "You're becoming quite the traveler lately." He chuckled too quickly. It was the kind of laugh that used to comfort me, but now it sounded rehearsed, mechanical. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't about meetings or conferences at all. I felt it in my bones. When he kissed me goodbye, I stood frozen, not from love, but from suspicion. The sound of his car pulling away echoed through the house like a slow closing door. I watched his taillights fade, a trail of red disappearing into the night, and felt the air shift around me. The moment he turned that corner, the silence became almost alive, heavy, knowing, and suffocating. My instincts were no longer whispers. They were sirens. I tried to distract myself by cleaning up the room, but every item felt like a clue left behind. His favorite tie, the one I gave him for our anniversary, was tucked under a pile of new clothes I didn't recognize. Then there was the cologne. It lingered in the air like arrogance, too strong, too deliberate. He only wore it when he wanted to impress someone, never for business. My hands trembled as I picked up his empty coffee mug, cold and forgotten, just like the truth between us. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the half-open closet door. We'd built this life together, or at least I thought we had. Lately, every time he mentioned networking, I felt a piece of my trust chip away. I'd convinced myself I was paranoid, the classic overthinking wife, but tonight that excuse didn't land. The silence in the house was different, sharp, alert, waiting for me to stop pretending. A memory flashed, last week at dinner, when I'd asked if he still loved me. He'd smiled, looked away and said, "You worry too much." The same words he used tonight. It hit me then. He wasn't reassuring me. He was dismissing me. I'd ignored the small things for too long. The late-night texts, the sudden gym memberships, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Now, every one of them was screaming in my head, daring me to see what I already knew. After he left, I wandered through the house like a ghost. His absence echoed in every corner, the faint click of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind brushing against the windows. I sat on the couch, hugging my knees, telling myself to stop imagining things. But that's the thing about intuition. It doesn't care if you're ready. It whispers until you finally listen. And that night, it was screaming. I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at his empty chair across the table. The untouched plate of dinner mocked me, still warm when he called to say he'd grabbed something on the way. My throat tightened as I scrolled through our text messages, pretending they meant something more than routine. "Love you. See you soon." So short, so distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that those words were just placeholders for guilt. When I finally went to bed, sleep wouldn't come. The sheet smelled like his cologne, and every inhale made my chest ache. I turned over and over, replaying his smile, his laugh, that subtle twitch in his jaw when he lied. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, waiting, like it knew it would soon reveal what my heart already suspected. By morning, I told myself, I'd either have peace or proof. It was close to midnight when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. At first I thought it was Ryan, maybe a quick text before bed, but the screen glowed with something else, a notification from our car tracking app. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. That little blinking pin, the one I usually ignored, was nowhere near an airport. It sat under a name I'd never noticed before. Moonlight Motel. 15 minutes from our house. I stared at the screen, willing it to move to tell me I was wrong. But it didn't. The car was still there, parked, unmoving, for 42 long minutes. My throat went dry, and I felt the world shrink to a single heartbeat pounding in my ears. I refreshed again, still there. Each time I blinked, I imagined him, in some dim room, lying to me without even hesitating. The trust I'd built brick by brick began to crumble. For a second, I just sat there, motionless, staring at that map like it held my entire marriage. Then something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. I threw on a coat, grabbed my keys, and felt my hands shaking as I locked the door behind me. The night air was cold, sharp, almost punishing. But for the first time in years, I felt wide awake, ready to see the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The drive felt longer than 15 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned pale. The city lights blurred past, and every stoplight seemed to mock me. Red, pause, think, turn back. But I didn't. My heart was louder than the engine, louder than the thoughts begging me to stay home. I wasn't chasing him. I was chasing the version of myself that still believed him. As I turned onto the narrow street, the flickering neon of Moonlight Motel came into view. The sign buzzed faintly, a tired hum in the cold air. I parked across the road and turned off my headlights. The silence that followed was suffocating, filled only by the ticking of the cooling engine. And then I saw it, his silver sedan. My body froze, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and recognition. There was no mistake. It was him. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Cars came and went. People laughed. Doors slammed. But I couldn't move. The glow from the motel sign painted everything in soft red and blue, like a cruel parody of romance. I watched the window curtains of room 12 shift slightly, a shadow moving behind them. My chest tightened until it hurt. That's when I realized I wasn't afraid of what I might see. I was afraid I'd been right all along. Time didn't exist anymore. I watched couples come and go, their laughter slicing through the night like a cruel melody. Every car door, every echo of heels on pavement made my stomach twist tighter. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, the door to room 12 opened. My breath hitched, and there he was. Ryan, my husband, smiling, his hand resting on the waist of a woman in a red dress. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared, frozen behind the windshield, my heart cracking in complete silence. She laughed, tossing her hair like she'd done it for him 100 times before. He looked happy, lighter, freer, like the man he used to be with me. And that's when something inside me changed. The ache turned into something steadier. Not fury, not grief, just resolve. Cold, clean, quiet resolve. I whispered to myself, barely audible over the hum of the motel sign. You lied to my face, Ryan. Packed a suitcase for another woman. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, calm, distant, unrecognizable. The kind of woman who doesn't beg for explanations. I knew what I had to do next. The game was no longer about love. It was about truth, and I was done waiting for it to find me. 40 minutes had passed, maybe more. I'd stopped counting. My fingers were stiff around the steering wheel, skin cold from the air that seeped through the cracked window. Every laugh that drifted from the motel courtyard stabbed at me, each one sounding like hers. My eyes burned, but I refused to blink. I wasn't leaving until I saw how far his lies went. The night was heavy, thick with the smell of cheap perfume and asphalt. Then, movement. The door opened again, and this time, it was him. Ryan stepped out first, jacket slung over his shoulder, followed by her. She was younger, radiant in a way that made me ache, but not from jealousy. From clarity. He reached for her hand and they laughed at something I couldn't hear. Watching them felt like watching strangers wearing our memories. It was a scene rehearsed in someone else's script. When she kissed him, my chest didn't shatter like I expected. It went still, completely still. That silence inside me was louder than anything else. He turned toward his car, smiling, unaware that his audience was sitting just across the street. And when the headlights flashed on, they landed on me, standing there, arms crossed, no tears, no chaos. Just me, the truth, and the end of whatever we used to be. He froze the second our eyes met. The color drained from his face as if the headlights had stripped him bare. Amanda? What the hell? What are you doing here? He stammered, voice trembling somewhere between guilt and fear. I didn't flinch. Waiting, I said softly. Since you claimed to be out of state, I wanted to see how far you'd actually gone. His mouth opened and closed like he was searching for oxygen in a room he'd just set on fire. It's not what it looks like, he blurted, the oldest line in the book. I tilted my head, almost pitying him. Really? So is the motel part of your conference package, or was she the guest speaker tonight? The sarcasm came out smooth, detached. Even I barely recognized my voice. He looked small suddenly, standing there under the hum of that neon sign, with all his lies flickering around us like broken light. I'd caught him mid-performance, and he had no script left. He reached for me, like touch could rewrite the moment, but I stepped back. Don't, I said, and my voice cracked, not from weakness, but from restraint. The woman glanced our way, then slipped into her car and drove off without looking back. Ryan turned to me again, pleading, "Can we just talk?" I met his gaze, steady and cold. You've been talking to everyone but me, Ryan. Tonight, I'm just here to listen to the truth you keep running from. He tried to speak, but nothing coherent came out. Just fragments of excuses, bits of panic dressed as logic. It was just dinner, he muttered, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Dinner with a motel attached? I shot back. My heart pounded, but my face stayed still. I'd never felt such control, not even in love, not even in peace. He wasn't my husband in that moment. He was a stranger auditioning for forgiveness he'd never earn. The air between us thickened, heavy with everything he didn't say. He kept shaking his head, as if denial could rewind time. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his guilt mixed with that new cologne. You lied to me, I said quietly. And the worst part? You did it so easily. For a moment, the weight of my words seemed to land. His shoulders dropped, his eyes flickered with something like shame. But I didn't want remorse. I wanted truth. When I finally turned to leave, the night felt different, sharper, almost clean. Behind me, he called my name once, but I didn't stop. I got in my car, hands steady now, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness like clarity slicing through confusion. As I pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of him in the rearview mirror, small, stunned, and standing in the glow of a cheap motel sign. Tomorrow, I decided, he'd learn what silence can really do. When I woke the next morning, the house was still. No trace of his voice, no sound of his keys jingling by the door. Just quiet, the kind that feels earned. I made coffee like any other day, but it tasted different, stronger, cleaner. As I sat at the table, the memory of last night replayed behind my eyelids, but this time, it didn't sting. It clarified. The shock was gone. In its place was something far steadier. Intention. I picked up my phone and started dialing. First, the motel. The man at the front desk sounded half asleep until I said the words, "My husband's safety." Suddenly, he was all cooperation. He gave me the manager's number, and by noon, I had the security footage. Labeled, time-stamped, undeniable. It was almost too easy. People underestimate calm women. They expect tears, not strategy. They never see what happens when we start documenting instead of pleading. Then came the call to his office. I used my softest voice, polite, helpful, the kind that invites trust. Just confirming Ryan's travel itinerary for reimbursement, I said sweetly. His boss laughed. What trip? He's been working remotely all week. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence, smiling into my coffee cup. He thought last night was the betrayal. He had no idea it was just the evidence collection. He walked through the door that evening, expecting chaos, raised voices, shattered glass, maybe tears. Instead, he found me sitting on the couch, a cup of tea in hand, the television humming softly behind me. His eyes darted around the room like he was searching for a storm that hadn't come yet. "Amanda," he said carefully, "we need to talk." I nodded. "We will." My tone was so calm it startled even me. Power has a quiet sound. He started pacing, spinning stories I'd already disproven. "It was a misunderstanding," he said. "She's just a coworker. We met to talk about a project." I handed him a photo from the motel's security footage, time-stamped, clear as daylight. He froze. "Funny," I said, because your project seems very hands-on. He sank onto the armchair, deflated. His words lost their rhythm. I didn't need to yell. The silence did all the talking for me. When he finally looked up, there was fear in his eyes, not remorse. You went too far, he whispered. I smiled, almost gently. No, Ryan, you did. Then I reached into the drawer and slid an envelope across the table. I thought you might want to sign something work-related for real this time. He opened it, saw the divorce papers, and the color drained from his face. You said you were leaving for work, I told him. You were right. You just didn't realize I'd make it official. He sat there staring at the papers like they were written in another language. I could see him searching my face for the woman who used to forgive him, the one who'd cry, argue, and make it easy for him to feel powerful again. But she wasn't there anymore. I'd buried her last night in that parking lot. What stood before him now was a version he'd never met. Quiet, deliberate, unbreakable. It was the first time he looked small in our house. I don't want this, he said finally, voice cracking like a boy caught lying for the first time. I almost laughed at the irony. Neither did I replied. But you didn't ask what I wanted when you decided to gamble our marriage for a motel room. His lips trembled, hands fidgeting with the envelope like it might rewrite itself. I stood, letting the chair scrape softly against the floor. That small, sharp sound was the only goodbye I needed. When I walked upstairs, I felt the weight lift, replaced by a strange, steady calm. I wasn't free yet, not entirely, but I was getting there. Downstairs, I could hear him breathing heavily, lost, cornered by the truth. For years, he'd taught me that silence was weakness. Tonight, he learned that mine could end everything he thought he controlled. Tomorrow, I'd take that silence to places that would hurt him far more than my tears ever could. By Monday, I was done crying. Not that I'd shed many tears anyway. I had work to do, and my work was Ryan. I gathered receipts, screenshots, timestamps, every careless detail he'd left behind. The lies weren't just emotional, they were financial too. Expense reports, fake business dinners, mileage claims tied to places like the Moonlight Motel. I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed to show his boss who he really was. Truth has a way of doing the rest. When the call came from his company's HR department, I didn't flinch. They'd reviewed the evidence I'd accidentally copied to the wrong email thread. Such a rookie mistake, right? Within a day, Ryan's name was wiped off the company directory. Terminated. Falsified reports, the email read. I made sure it reached his inbox before he woke up. For years, he'd turned deceit into routine. Now, routine was what undid him. As I watched him pack his things into boxes, a strange calm settled over me. He looked broken, smaller than I remembered, like someone who'd been living on borrowed confidence. He muttered something about lawyers, reputation, second chances. I didn't answer. I just smiled politely, the way he used to when he lied. Good luck, Ryan, I said softly. You'll need it where you're going. And for the first time in years, I meant every word. The house was mine, literally. My name sat alone on the deed, something I'd never thought twice about until now. I walked through each room like a curator reclaiming her gallery after years of loaning it to someone careless. His clothes were gone from the closet, his toothbrush missing from the sink, but the air felt clean again. I opened every window, letting the sun pour in. The silence that once felt suffocating now sounded like freedom. That afternoon, I called the dealership. Yes, I told the man on the phone. The silver sedan is ready for sale. Title's in my name. His surprise made me smile. Ryan had used that car for his so-called business trips, and now it would finance my fresh start. Within a week, it was gone, replaced by a small, elegant car that fit me, not us. Every mile I drove afterward felt like a piece of my old life fading in the rearview mirror. One evening, my lawyer called to confirm the final paperwork. You handled this brilliantly, Amanda, she said. Calm, documented, clean. I laughed softly. I'm done cleaning up his messes. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. Revenge, I realized, didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, I'm free. And that whisper was louder than any scream could ever be. A week later, I drove past the Moonlight Motel again. The sign still flickered, buzzing weakly against the night sky. For a moment, I slowed down, watching the same parking lot where my world had cracked open. But now it didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a landmark, a place where something old had died so something truer could begin. I smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace. Closure doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes, it's just the sound of your own laughter. I parked for a minute, just long enough to let the memory settle. I remembered the version of me who'd sat here trembling, waiting for a truth she already knew. She thought that night would destroy her, but she didn't know she'd be reborn in that same silence. Stronger, sharper, free. I whispered to the empty lot. He thought I'd wait forever. He was right, just not in the way he expected. Then I started the car and left without looking back. The road ahead felt infinite. New city, new air, new rules. As the wind rushed through the open window, I realized that revenge wasn't the ending. It was the doorway. I hadn't punished him. I'd reclaimed myself. My story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about survival, and how beautifully it can look when written in your own handwriting. And somewhere in the distance, the night folded quietly around me, soft and certain, like freedom itself. Months passed, and my life became unrecognizable, in the best way possible. I'd moved to a smaller city by the coast, where mornings smelled like salt and coffee instead of anxiety. The first thing I did was cut my hair, short, sharp, like punctuation at the end of a long run-on sentence. I got a new job, met people who knew nothing about my past, and for once, that anonymity felt like luxury. Every sunrise whispered the same thing: you made it out. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in a shop window and barely recognize the woman looking back. She smiled more easily, walked taller, laughed without glancing over her shoulder first. I'd learned to be alone without being lonely, a skill I didn't know I needed. Freedom, I realized, wasn't a loud celebration. It was quiet mornings, warm coffee, and knowing I could go anywhere without permission. I'd stopped surviving. I'd started living. One afternoon, I sat at a cafe near the water, reading, when I heard someone call my name. I looked up. It was Claire, a friend from my old neighborhood. Her eyes widened, taking me in. "Amanda, I heard about the divorce. How are you?" she asked, her tone careful, pitying. I smiled and set down my cup. "Better than ever," I said. Turns out waiting in that parking lot was the last time I ever sat still for someone else. After Claire left, I sat there for a while, watching the tide roll in and out. There was something hypnotic about the rhythm. Waves coming, waves leaving, never fighting their own timing. I realized I'd spent years trying to control the tide of my marriage, trying to hold back something that was always meant to change. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about excusing him. Maybe it was about setting myself free from the weight of remembering. Letting go didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like breathing. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see that motel sign flickering in the dark, not as a symbol of pain, but as a reminder of awakening. That was the night I stopped being afraid of truth. The night I learned that silence can be power, and that peace doesn't mean the absence of anger. It means knowing exactly where to place it. He taught me betrayal, yes, but unintentionally, he also taught me liberation. Strange how destruction can leave you cleaner than before. As I sipped the last of my coffee, a couple passed by the window, holding hands and laughing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel envy or ache. I felt nothing, just contentment. That was new, and it was enough. I'd once believed love was something you needed someone else to give you. Now I knew better. Love was something you built quietly, within yourself, when you finally stopped begging to be chosen.